Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today is going to be my predictions video for the second week of the 2020 playoffs. It is the final weekend before we get to the grand finals weekend here in a couple of weeks. Let's jump in and let's start with Asia. There are 3 matches this weekend: the winners finals, losers semifinals, and losers finals. I will start with the winners finals, Shanghai versus Seoul. I think Shanghai will likely be the team to take the win in this series. They've looked good all season. They have had their struggles against the Seoul Dynasty in the past, but the Seoul Dynasty have not looked as strong for the most part against the Shanghai Dragons. The Seoul Dynasty have had a great run so far. They have not dropped a single map to any of their opponents thus far, but I feel like Shanghai is just too strong of an opponent. Yes, New York was able to take a map off of Shanghai and force them to map 5 with a draw on King's Row. You have another week with Shanghai. They have more time to see what Seoul's going to play. I think that this should be a win that is somewhat easy for the Shanghai Dragons. Moving to the losers semifinals, New York versus Guangzhou Charge. This is an interesting series to me. I think New York looked better this past weekend than Guangzhou did. I thought Guangzhou ran some interesting compositions with some weird looks that weren't necessarily the best looks they could have brought out. The FAR compositions I don't think looked super great, but I also think that they just lost to a Seoul Dynasty team that's really good, and they're a playoff Seoul Dynasty team, which tournaments have been where I think the Seoul Dynasty have looked the best so far this season. So I look at this matchup here as an interesting one against a New York team that had a good series against Shanghai, one of the best ones they've had so far this season. I think ultimately this series winner doesn't really matter. I think that whoever wins this one probably doesn't get past the Seoul Dynasty. I think the Seoul Dynasty looked too good. But my heart of hearts has me thinking that the Guangzhou Charge will have a bounce back weekend after a disappointing weekend last weekend, and they will come out and they will take the win over the NYXL. NYXL have been meh. They were not the best against Chengdu, and they looked pretty good against Shanghai. I'd like to see them level up their play this weekend, but I don't love the compositions they're running. I also don't love the personnel that they're running. Don't really know why we haven't seen any Nene yet in the playoffs, especially when they've been running a number of somber compositions with, not somber compositions. They've been running compositions with Widowmaker at times. They've been running SBB on the long-range hit scan, and while I think SBB is a very good leader for this team, I think that long-range hit scan-wise, your best option is Nene, and I think it's a little weird that they're not running him. Hotpa has looked fine. I would still like to see Bianca, because I think Bianca has looked better as a whole when he's played, but I think on the Diva, Hotpa is still very competent and still a very good Diva player, so I think that in terms of personnel, it's not the worst, but there are some things I wish would change a little bit. I think this is a close series. I think that the winner of this one, like I said, it probably doesn't matter, but I think right now, the week off, I think will help Guangzhou bounce back, take a good win over the NYXL. But I think the Seoul Dynasty ultimately are going to beat either Guangzhou or New York in the losers finals and lock up the second spot into the grand finals weekend in Asia. Seoul have looked really good, and I think when it comes to playoff time, that is when the Seoul Dynasty really kind of wake up. I think their coaching staff and their players don't put too much stock into the regular season. I think they have been prepping and preparing and building to be a dominant team come playoff time, and that is what I think they are right now. I think they have a very good opportunity and a strong possibility of making it into the top 4 for the grand finals weekend, so I'm taking the Seoul Dynasty to be the second team out of there, which means I think the Shanghai Dragons and the Seoul Dynasty will be the 2 teams coming out of Asia. Moving over to North America now, we have some interesting matches. Let's start with the winners finals. Philadelphia Fusion taking on the San Francisco Shock, the big match of this weekend, by far the one that most people are excited for. Right now, I think this is a very interesting matchup in particular. The Shock have, for the most part, had the Fusion's number this season in their 2 matchups that they've had so far, or the 3 matchups they've had so far. Shock have won 2, Fusion have won 1, but the Fusion did win the most recent matchup by a score of 3-0. This one is very interesting. The Fusion, I think, have looked the best so far of the teams in North America during the playoffs, but they also have played only 2 games against 2 weaker opponents. They played the LA Gladiators and they played the LA Valiant, neither of whom have been exceptional. The Shock had a close match against a very good Washington Justice team in which the Shock reverse swept, and they had a pretty dominant win over the Atlanta Reign. So the Fusion have yet to be tested. The Shock have been tested but haven't looked as good. Who do I think really takes the win in that scenario? Right now, I think that the Fusion are going to win this match. And I've been on the train for a while that the Shock are just the better team right now than the Fusion. But Moth in the postgame interview with the Atlanta Reign essentially said that we knew that we could mirror anything that Atlanta wanted to run and we could just win because we're the better team. And I don't think you can do that against the Shock or against the Fusion. I think the Fusion are too good for the Shock to have that mentality. Now, I think, of course, you're going to have a week this weekend, or this past week, where the Shock were just working and grinding and making sure they were ready for the Fusion come this match this time around. So it was a little more preparation and making sure that they were ready. But I think that the Fusion have so many looks that they can pull out that we haven't seen that they might run, that I think they should be able to take this one against the Shock, knocking the Shock down into the lower bracket and the losers finals. Moving down to the losers quarter final matches, the Atlanta Reign take on the Florida Mayhem. I like the Mayhem. I don't think the Reign are that good of a team. I think the Reign are the weakest of the teams left in the entirety of the playoffs. And I think that the Mayhem should pretty easily be able to find a win in a series against a team that I don't even think the Florida Mayhem have struggled with at all this season. LA Valiant versus the Washington Justice is a very interesting matchup. Washington Justice have looked really good so far in this playoffs, but the problem that they face is that there has been more time for other teams to prepare for their play style. Teams like the Valiant and the Mayhem and the Reign are going to know what the Justice are, and the Justice really don't have a ton of flexibility in terms of the composition they can run. They pretty much have to run the Hog Zarya with Janu and Decay, and they have no flexibility then on DPS, and they have no flexibility on support regardless. They can run somewhat different heroes maybe, but you want to keep Arc on Mercy, and you want to keep Aim God on Zenyatta. So I think it's an interesting matchup, but I just think the Justice are so good at this composition, and I think that Decay and Stitch have had such great performances, and John, who's looked very good on the Roadhog. I do think that the Justice will find victory in this series in particular against a very good Valiant team. I think that they are definitely the favorites in this matchup, the Justice, in a weird way, in a weird world where that is the case. I look at the Mayhem right now as a team that could maybe challenge the Justice, but I don't think the Valiant are with the way that we have seen them play. It's possible. The Valiant have very good coordination, something that I think a lot of teams don't have. But right now, I don't even think there's anybody in the league other than the top 3 perceived teams that can stop this Justice composition from working the way it does. So I think that even when they play the winner of Atlanta versus Florida, which in this case I think is going to be Florida, I still think the Justice will find the victory. I think that it's going to be hard for them to get to that point, because I think both of these teams, no matter who it is, if it's Valiant and then the Mayhem or the Reign, any of those 3 teams are going to be preparing specifically to play against the Justice. They're going to say, we know what Justice are going to run. They're going to run Zarya, they're going to run Hog, and they're going to run the Ashe with the Sombra most likely, and they're going to run the Mercy Zenyatta. We know exactly what composition they're going to run, so we are going to build to make sure we counter this one comp. And the Justice have so little flexibility that I think if you can figure that out, you're just going to win. So I think it is difficult for the Justice, but I just think that just the raw talent that they have shown and just the way that they have looked in this one composition is so good that I realistically don't think the Valiant or the Mayhem are going to be able to stop them. So I think that the Justice will make it into the losers finals. They will be top 3 North America based on the playoffs, but I don't think they make it into the top 4. I think that they get stopped by the Shock. They have already lost to the Shock once. I don't think that they will be able to pull off the upset. So that is where I think it goes. I think the Shock will also make it into the top 4, make it into the grand finals weekend. And I think that the 4 teams I'll move on are the Shanghai Dragons and Seoul Dynasty from Asia, and the Philadelphia Fusion and the San Francisco Shock from North America. But that is where I am going to end this video off. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, who you think is going to make it out. If you think I'm crazy for thinking the Justice are going to be that good, let me know. Love to hear from you, but that is all for me. Thank you once again. If you enjoyed, consider liking and subscribing for more content like this in the future. But until next time, hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And bye-bye.